Imagine for a moment that you got a sneak peek of how world events would unfold for the rest of this century. What sort of things do you think you would see? Now, it's hard for us to predict the future. I don't know what tomorrow is going to hold, let alone what the year 2100 is going to hold, right? But let's imagine you could go back to 1900 and have no idea what happened in the 20th century. In the year 1900, you were given a glimpse of all the world events of the 20th century. How would you feel? Imagine the triumphs that you would see unfold during that century. You would see us go in the areas of medicine from having antibiotics to having our DNA decoded all in one century. You would see us in terms of transportation go from the automobile to the airplane to landing on the moon all in one century. You would see people going from Morse code on telegraphs to having telephones not only in their homes but now in their pockets, and also having televisions, being able to watch stuff wherever they go. You'd see amazing triumphs. You would see the internet, which sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, right? And you'd see things like personal computers come to be within this century, going from horse and buggy in 1900s to what we saw in the year 2000. That would be staggering to take in if you took it all in at once. If you were given one sneak peek of all those events crammed into one vision for you of 100 years. But it's not just triumphs that you would see. You would also see tragedies during that century. You would see tragedies like the Titanic and the Challenger space shuttle, and you would see Chernobyl nuclear reactor. You'd see during that century 10,000 earthquakes and famines that killed 70 million people. You would see two world wars. World War I called the war to end all wars, but it wasn't. Just 30 years later, World War II came along, and it was even worse, engulfing more countries and taking more lives, both soldiers and civilians. And when the dust settled from World War II, the world was not left with peace. It was left with a Cold War and the ever-growing specter of the threat of nuclear annihilation. I remember growing up as a kid in the 80s, and it was always on your mind. Here's the thing. If all of that was given to you, in one dream, in one vision, in one moment, you got a sneak peek of all the events of the 20th century, and it all downloaded to you in one moment, how would you feel? Well, that's what Daniel was experiencing last week. Last week in Daniel chapter 7, as we began our series in the second half of the book of Daniel, in a series we're calling Prophecies and Promises. What we're looking at is Daniel basically seeing the events of world history unfold before him in one dream. But it wasn't 100 years. It was more like 600 years of world history just being crammed into his mind and in his heart in one small moment. It's hard to imagine what he felt, isn't it? And this week, Daniel's visions are going to continue. We're going to zoom in a little closer into what Daniel saw last week. We're going to zoom in a little closer to events of world history and what Daniel will experience this week. But as we do, we're going to be going through a chapter that is not often taught. Little quick note about our church. We're committed to expository preaching, walking verse by verse through books of the Bible, doing that in a way where when we go to a text, we're not trying to impose our ideas on what God's Word has to say. We're trying to take the original context, the original language. We consider the original audience, what it meant to them, so that the Bible's telling us what it has to say as opposed to us shoving our ideas onto the text. And when you are committed to expository preaching, you're also committed to landing in chapters that aren't often preached. You're committed to stepping into topics and texts that are difficult and complicated. And I'll put to you, Daniel 8 is one of the chapters that a lot of churches would just skip if they were teaching on the book of Daniel. They'd get to the point and go, I don't know what to do with this. Let's just go to the next one. But I'm glad we're studying it today. I'm glad we're committed to expository preaching. I hope by the time we're done, you'll agree. If you don't, I'll still be glad that we're committed to this. But as we dive into it, what I want us to see is this, is that God, even in the chapters that the church often ignores, God has something to say to his people. And I believe he has something to say to us this morning through Daniel chapter 8. Will you join me? Daniel chapter 8, verse 1, as Daniel's visions and dreams continue here in the second half of the book. It says, in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. So he's saying, I had a dream, I had a vision after the one from Daniel chapter 7. So here's verse 2. And I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal. Now I raised my eyes, and I saw, And behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had two horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. And I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and he became great. Now, King Belshazzar was the king of the Babylonian Empire. He was the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar, who is the one who defeated Jerusalem so many years back and had taken Daniel and his friends into captivity, taken them away as slaves when they were just teenagers. And so he had ruled, history tells us that he ruled for only 2 years in terms of counting the number of months. But as Daniel's people reckoned time, it was a part of the third year. He was into his third year, at least parts of it, in terms of his reign. So what we know from history is that the clock is ticking on King Belshazzar and the Babylonian Empire. Now we know from our first half of Daniel that he had the writing on the wall during the party that he was throwing, and while everybody was partying and they were having a grand old time, the Medo-Persian Empire was invading him and taking him over. That clock was ticking down when Daniel was having this vision. But in his vision, Daniel's not in Babylon. He's in Babylon while he's having it, but in his vision, he is in a city called Susa, which is actually a prominent city in the Persian Empire, about 200 miles away. And while he's there, he's standing by a canal. He sees a ram by the canal, and the ram is powerful, wiping out everything in its path. Nothing can stand against it, but that unmatched power is not going to last. Look at verse 5. It says, as I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram with the two horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal. And he ran at him in his powerful wrath. And I saw him come closer to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and he struck the ram, and he broke his two horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but cast him down to the ground and trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Then the goat became exceedingly great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up four conspicuous horns toward the four winds of the earth. So Daniel, he sees the ram. Now he sees a goat. We got, old MacDonald happening here in this vision for him. And this goat is moving swiftly, knocking down everything in its path, moving swiftly from the west. And no one could stop the goat. No one could stand against the goat. If you've ever been around an angry goat, you know it's pretty true, right? They tend to there's someone nearby, let me butt them, right? Let me ram into them. So the goat had this conspicuously large horn right between its eyes. Not very typical for a goat, but this goat had it in the vision. The goat and the ram may have looked a little bit something like this that you see here on the screen. So the goat comes against the ram, takes down the ram, breaks off the horns, defeats it, but then the horn of the goat is broken off, and these four horns replace it, reaching out to the four winds of the earth. You're like, really? I got up on Sunday to hear about these weird farm animals having battles? It's a strange vision, isn't it? I promise there's a point to it, and I promise it's not me just putting a point onto it. God's word gives a point and a purpose to it as well. Is that description of the goat, though, starting to sound a little familiar to something that we heard last week? Let's keep going. Verse 9. Verse 9 says, out of one of those horns came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land. It grew great even to the host of heaven, and some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host, and the regular burnt offerings was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. And a host will be given over to it together with the regular burnt offerings because of transgression, and it will throw truth to the ground, and it will act and prosper. So Daniel's seeing weird things again. Last week, we had the four beasts that came up out of the sea. We had the lion, the bear, the leopard with four heads. Remember that? And we had a beast that was unlike any other. And this week, he sees a ram being defeated by a goat with four horns. So again this week, just as we saw last week, there's a little horn that's causing problems. There's a little horn that's wreaking havoc. And so this little horn, it grew exceedingly great. Even to the host of heaven is how it's described. It challenged the prince of hosts. which is usually when the word host is used in Scripture, it's describing armies and armies of heaven. You have him outlawing offerings. You have him overthrowing the sanctuary, which is referring probably to the temple. And he threw truth to the ground. So this little horn that's being described, that's being seen in Daniel's vision, is wreaking havoc somewhere to someone. So while Daniel's vision is strange, for him, when he hears this passage, it's beginning to sound not only familiar and something that he recognizes, or maybe he can kind of correlate to his last vision, it's beginning to sound like home. Look at verse 13. He says, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, 'For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offerings, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?' And he said to me, 'For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be restored to its rightful state.'" In this vision, Daniel sees two holy ones, probably angels, talking to one another about the vision that Daniel is seeing. You have these two beasts, you have these things going, you have the small horn wreaking havoc, and you have all these things happening, and these angels are talking to one another, and they're allowing Daniel to eavesdrop on their conversation. One of the angels had three questions. How long will these events last? How long will the goat's desecration stop the sacrifices? And how long will the sanctuary and the host be trampled on? The angel's going, what's going on here? How long is this going to happen? They're talking to one another. And the answer comes 2,300 evenings and mornings. Now, before you grab your watch or your phone and start doing some calculations, let's figure out what that might mean. It either means 6 1/3 years, or it means 3.5 years. And it depends on how you're dealing with those two things. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it in just a second. But it gives, this isn't a vague, this is an odd image. This is a symbolic vision that's supposed to represent real-world events to come, but a very specific number that is given. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in a second. Now, why those different lengths? Look at verse 15. Let's keep going. See if Daniel's given an answer. Verse 15 says, "When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. And behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called, 'Gabriel, make this man understand the vision.' So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened, and I fell on my face. But he said to me, 'Understand, O son of man, that the vision is for the time of the end.' And when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground, and he touched me, and he made me stand up." So here we have the introduction of a new name, a new person, a name you've probably heard before. We hear the name of one of the angels is Gabriel. Now, we don't know the name of most of the angels. We know there's 10,000 angels. There's a bunch of them. We don't know their names. We know Gabriel, and we know Michael. And Gabriel you probably have heard before because he's shown up in God's story and in parts of the story that are very familiar to us. He showed up telling Zechariah that he and his wife were going to have a baby even they were old, and his name was going to be John, who would become John the Baptist. We see Gabriel showing up to tell Mary that she is going to give birth to God's son. Gabriel may have been the angel that took the message to Joseph saying, "Don't be afraid, go ahead and marry her. What's happening here is of God." So Gabriel is this angel that in essence sort of is the herald, the speaker bringing God's message to God's people. And it's very interesting here in this moment to see the juxtaposition of this angelic power and the earthly power that was in the vision. Daniel's seeing this angel, incredible power, but he's also seeing these beasts that are representing something that's to come, and they have incredible power. These earthly beasts could not be stopped. They are mowing through the land, conquering everything in their path. We're not sure what it means exactly yet, but we see that happening. And yet this angel shows up. Daniel doesn't fall on his face at the sight of the beast. He doesn't fall on his face at the sight of the goat or of the ram or any of the other things. But an angel shows up and poof, he hits the ground. You see this juxtaposition of earthly power that can't be stopped, and yet one angel shows up and Daniel goes, "I can't handle it." And he drops. Why? Daniel's not the only one that does that. We saw at Easter when we talked about the Roman soldiers guarding the tomb, that an angel showed up. There was an earthquake, and an angel showed up to roll away the stone. And what did the Roman soldiers do? Hit the ground. We see John having a vision of heaven in the book of Revelation. Hits the ground, right? People showing up and seeing angels there, boom, they hit the ground often. Why? He's having this sneak peek of this future where these earthly forces cannot be stopped, and yet he's in the presence not just of earthly power and seeing these things in his vision. He's in the presence of an angel, which is the herald of the ultimate power of God. And in light of that power, Daniel can do nothing but drop to the ground in awe and wonder and being overwhelmed by what he's experiencing. That's an important reminder for you and I. When we look at the difference between earthly powers and heavenly powers, when we're seeing things happening on earth that we can't understand and we can't control, we're not very at peace, are we? We have almost no peace when those things are happening. But our peace is not dependent on our power. Our peace rests in the sovereign power of the Almighty God. When we want peace, we want to have it because it's the absence of problems. That's not what Scripture promises. Scripture promises that you can have peace that passes all understanding right in the midst of the storm you would never sign up for. Why? Because our peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of God. And that's a completely different way to look at our lives and our world. Our peace is not dependent on our power, it's dependent on God's power. So when we have fear rising up in us, when we have anxiety rising up in us, we need that to be a warning light in our lives, a warning light that something is not right. Whenever peace eludes us, it's a sure sign that we are trying to live life in our strength. It is a sure sign that we've gone, God, I know you sit on high and you're on the throne and you rule and reign forever. There's some stuff here I'm trying to control. And I don't think you're doing exactly what you ought to be doing with it. So let me worry about it. Let me have my fear. Let me have my anxiety. Let me have my sleepless nights because, God, I'm not sure you're doing what you need to do with this thing. We don't say that out loud, do we? But doesn't it sound foolish to hear it? We are saying, God, I'm not sure you're able. Or if you're able, I'm not sure you care. And at the end of the day, we can't make that case from Scripture, can we? When we are fearful, when worry is rising up, it's a sure sign that we've said, God, you need my strength instead of me needing yours. Has your warning light been going off some? Sometimes mine does too. Now Daniel, he's back on his feet. The angel's talking to him, and he's going to explain what Daniel has seen and heard. Look at verse 19. The angel said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation. This is not talking about the end of time, the latter end of the scene that Daniel is seeing. It says, for it refers to the appointed time of the end. As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia, and the goat is the king of Greece. And the great horn between his eyes is the first king. Now, as for the horn that was broken in its place, which 4 others arose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. So, while the beasts are different this week than what we saw last week, it's really focusing on the same idea, the same sort of category of world events. It's the rise and fall of empires. That's what he's seeing in his dream. But it's going closer in, moving in, it's zooming in to a specific time in those rises and falls. It's the same events he saw last week, just going in closer to one of those rises and one of those falls. Now, when that happens, he sees the ram. You can see it on the screen here. This is the Medo-Persian Empire. And then the goat is the Greek Empire. And that conspicuously large horn that was on the goat, that's the great king. Now, from history, we know that the Greek city-states were united by Alexander the Great. First time they've been united, one of the only times they were really all united. And in about a 12-year span, Alexander the Great rolled across a lot of the known world, conquering civilization and empire after empire, just wiping them all out in incredibly swift fashion. That great horn was Alexander the Great, but when the great horn was broken, when Alexander the Great died at a relatively young age, he was replaced by 4 of his generals. And the 4 generals broke up that conquered land into 4 different sub-kingdoms. And so that was what we see happening in history, and it's what was predicted in the prophecy that God gave to Daniel. All these 4 sub-kingdoms were strong, but none of them were as strong as the United Kingdom that had been under Alexander. But then Daniel's vision zooms in not only to one of those rises and falls, it zooms in a little closer to the events happening within one of those subkingdoms. Look at verse 23. It says, "And at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause fearful destruction and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand, and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken, but not by human hand. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true, but seal up this vision, for it refers to many days from now." So Daniel's vision includes a lot of details about one of the kings of one of those subkingdoms, zooming in really to the region where Israel is located. Zooming into that, it says that this little horn that we referenced earlier, this horn that's going to grow great, that's going to shut off sacrifices and offerings, that's going to overthrow the sanctuary and the temple, one of those four subkingdoms is where this happened. This would be right in the land of God's people, the land promised to them, the land that Daniel and his people are in exile from for 70 years because of their rebellion against God. Well, at one point they come back, and around 175 BC, one of these subkingdoms called Seleucus was reigned by a king called Antiochus IV. Now, Antiochus IV was an evil king. To give you two little glimpses into what this guy was like, two things. First, he had a coin minted with his image on one side, which is not unusual for any king or ruler. On the back, he had an engraving on it, and what it said is Theos Epiphanes, which means God manifest. So he basically made a coin going, hey, I'm Antioch, right? I'm God. I'm God manifest. I'm God appearing before you. He had sort of a self-confidence problem, right? He sort of struggled. He didn't feel good about himself. He needed these coins to do that. Like, who does that? And what's funny is that he called himself Antiochus Epiphanes, and his enemies, those who were living under his thumb and under his boot, called him Epinomes, which that word actually means madman. So it gives you a little glimpse of what this guy was like. He thought he was God, and those who had to deal with him thought he was a madman. That's who this guy is. What did he do? Well, by this time in history, most of God's people have returned from the exile. We have the record of this story in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, where they send a group back to reestablish worship in the temple, and then they send Nehemiah back to allow him to rebuild the walls. Really cool books, but you have them moving back into the promised land over a long period of time, but by the time that Antiochus has come to power in this area, a lot of them are back. And Antiochus, he delighted in persecuting God's people. It was his favorite thing to do. Other than like celebrate himself, his favorite thing to do was to persecute God's people. He did everything the little horn had been prophesied to do. He declared himself equal with God. He told God's people they could no longer worship in their own temple, and he even sacrificed a pig on the altar of God's temple, which, if you know anything about Jewish dietary laws, they weren't allowed to eat pigs, let alone sacrifice pigs. This is a desolation within the temple of the Most High God. This is him setting himself up as God in this. And remember what the angels were asking? How long will this happen? How long will the temple be defiled? How long will the offerings be stopped? Catch this. History has it down, like almost down to the day when these things happened, when the offerings were stopped and when they were started again, when Antiochus started persecuting God's people and when he was removed from power, when he died. Here's how it works out. Antiochus stopped the daily morning and evening sacrifices for 3.5 years. 2,300 sacrifices means one in the morning and one in the evening, which was the pattern at the temple, and that comes out to 3.5 years, and that's how long the offerings were stopped in history. How long did Antiochus persecute God's people? Well, from the time that he started persecuting them, I think to his death, it was exactly 6 1/3 years. The 2,300 days prophecy that happened hundreds of years, 400 years before any of it came to be, had amazing not only accuracy, but specificity. This is stunning. If you and I were trying to predict what was going to be the headline tomorrow, we may struggle. If we were trying to predict the headline a year from now, we wouldn't have a shot. God calls his shots centuries ahead of time down to the day. And we still wonder if God's in control. This prophecy is amazingly accurate. And Daniel's getting to see it, but he's taking a lot in. He's seeing stuff that he'll never experience, but it's stuff that's hitting close to home. If you were Daniel, how would you be feeling at this point? Look at verse 27. And I, Daniel, was overcome, and I lay sick for many days. Then I rose, and I went about the king's business. But I was appalled by the vision, and I did not understand it. Daniel did what maybe we do sometimes. I got to shut down for a bit. Need a mental health day. Daniel goes to bed and has a mental health day, and he's got no shows to binge. Daniel wasn't just dealing with this vision of these beasts roaming across the earth. He wasn't just dealing with these predictions of the rise and fall of empires. When we see tragedies unfold around the world, we're touched by them, but it's very different to watch world events on a screen or see them in a vision, and it's one thing to have those visions and the tragedy and that suffering and that pain coming close to home. Daniel had a vision of what was going to happen to his people. He had a vision of what was going to happen to the promised land that he was hoping he'd get to see one day. And if not him, God's people would one day return. He's having visions of those things. And he was feeling like we probably would feel. Daniel was overwhelmed. Do you ever feel overwhelmed? We've not seen a prophecy revealing what the next centuries will hold. But you know, we don't need beastly prophecies to feel overwhelmed. We have access to at least two things that actually work quite well to generate overwhelmingness for us. First is this. We have 24-hour news showing us the absolute worst news from around the globe in every single moment. It used to be that humanity only had to deal with the tragedy that was in their line of sight. You lived in a town or even you lived in a city, you may get a newspaper, and at most, you might get an article about what happened and a sketch drawing before pictures were available. We now have access to all tragedies in all places, all at the same time. Humanity's not built to see the tragedy that we see. We're just not built for it. And there's too much coming into our lives all the time. That's one of the problems that we face. Second one is this. We have this limitless imagination. And human imagination come up with some really great things, but I know what mine does sometimes. It likes to imagine worst-case scenarios. Imagine like what could go wrong in my life or in the life of my family or my children or in the church or in our world. And we imagine worst-case scenarios, and we will worry about things that have not happened yet. No one's told us they're going to happen yet. Our fleshly imagination just goes, well, what if this happens? And we can feel overwhelmed by things that, let's be honest, our worst-case scenarios, what's our batting average on predicting those well? We wouldn't make the minor leagues, would we? Like, it's really, really low about how many of our predictions of worst-case scenarios have come true. What do we do when we feel overwhelmed? Well, what did Daniel do when he felt overwhelmed? He did go to bed for a couple days, and he felt awful. But then what did he do? He got up, he got back to work. Daniel did not let the horrors of the future keep him from serving God in the now. And we've got to remember, not only was Daniel have a reason to be overwhelmed in the vision he had seen of hundreds of years of world history condensed into one dream or one vision, seeing carnage, and not only having it be world events, but having it be events that come close to home and to his family and to his people and to his homeland. He was also a slave, a prisoner, living in a strange land. He was also in exile, living away from his promised land, hoping to come back one day. At the end of the day, Daniel did not let those horrors of his present or of the future, he did not let it keep him from serving God in the now. And neither should we. How do we pick ourselves up and get back to work? I think we need to reevaluate our expectations. I think we need to reevaluate our expectations. Imagine you got a sneak peek of your future. What do you think you'd see? What does the next 10, 20, 30 years look like for you? What does the next 10, 20, 30 days look like for you? Imagine your future, whatever length of time you want to do. None of us can see what that future holds. We're not good at predicting the future events. But you know what we can do? We can look back to the past and see what the past held for us and use that as at least a bit of an indicator. What happened in the last 10, 20, 30 years of your life? I'm willing to bet that in your life there were great joys and there were great sorrows. There were moments that bring a tear to your eye and it's a tear of joy. And there are moments that bring a tear to your eye and it's a tear of sorrow. Is there any reason to believe that the next 10, 20 years won't have the exact same thing? Moments of great joy, but also moments of great sorrow. That would be a reasonable expectation for the next 10, 20, 30 years based on the last 10, 20, 30 years, right? But here's what I find in my life, and maybe it's true in yours, that our expectation of what's coming does not match our experience of what has happened before. Our expectation of what's over the horizon is not revealed in our worst case scenario thinking. I think our expectation of what we're going to face in the future is actually revealed in our footing. How do we have our feet set stepping into the days that we have not yet seen? We need to check our footing because we live with this expectation of smooth sailing. We set our footing as if we're on a stroll through the park. We set our footing as if it's going to be smooth sailing, a nice path, nothing to trip over, nothing to come against us. We're not going to have any issues at all. Have you guys seen the news reports of people in New York City? I think it's been women mostly, but it's been some men as well, just walking along, living life in the big city, and a stranger out of nowhere will punch them in the face. Have you guys seen these news reports? It's shocking and it's horrible. But I want you to imagine you're strolling through a park, and you're just having a nice, easy stroll, and you're expecting smooth sailing. But then somebody punches you in the face. You had no expectation. You had no expectation that your stroll would result in a punch, right? But now change the scenario. You're not taking a walk in the park. You're stepping into the ring. You're stepping into the octagon. If you stepped into the octagon or stepped into the ring, you are a fighter facing a foe. If you got in there and somebody punched you and you went, whoa, 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 I didn't sign up for this, no one would believe that. That would be ludicrous for you to go, no one told me I would get punched in a fight, right? Here's the deal. Is life in a fallen world, is it a walk through the park or is it a round in the octagon? Which one is it? Look back to the last 10, 20, 30 years of your life. I'm not saying every day is ding, ding, somebody's come to punch you. But aren't there days when they are? And they aren't days that you expected. So what's the reasonable way for us to respond to a life that's more like the octagon than it is the park? It's for us to step into life with our footing placed, ready to be punched. What do we have to do? How do we evaluate our expectations? We set our feet for tragedy. I don't do this to be pessimistic. I don't do this to be like a downer. What I'm telling you is what Jesus told us. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, right? And when trouble comes, we go, Jesus, where were you? I got punched. What happened? And I imagine Jesus in the most loving way possible going, I told you in this world there will be trouble. What did his brother James write? Consider it pure joy when you experience trials of any kind. We're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Nobody mentioned trials. No, he did mention trials. We have to set our feet for the possibility of tragedy because when we don't, we are staggered and we are rocked and it wrecks us, not just for the moment, but it wrecks us to our core. It wrecks us in our faith. If we won't set our feet for tragedy, we're not going to be ready when we didn't hear the bell ring and somebody punches us. If we don't set our feet for tragedy, we are not going to be ready when a fallen world brings fallen things into our lives. If we don't set our feet for tragedy, we are not going to be ready when what Jesus promised happens. In this world, you will have trouble. But I won't leave you with just setting your feet for tragedy because we need to set our hopes for triumph. We need to take Jesus seriously when he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. When the punches come, we are not alone. When the storms come, we are not alone. Our peace is not in the absence of problems, it's in the presence of Christ. We need to take not only Jesus seriously, we need to take God at his word when he says, for those who love God, all things work together for good. It does not say all things are good. It says that when God is on the throne and you are following Christ, that God can take the worst possible things and work them out for your good and for his glory. If you doubt that, we call the day Jesus died on a cross Good Friday. And we look at a tomb with a body and say, wait to see what God does. God can work all things together for good for those who love God, for those who are called according to our purpose. So we evaluate our expectations. We set our feet for tragedy. We set our hopes for triumph. And we can only do that by fixing our eyes on Jesus. Our only hope of triumph is in Christ. It's not apart from Christ. So if you're not following Jesus today, the punches are going to keep coming and you are on your own. If you're not following Christ today, it's not just the punches that are inflicted upon you. It is the sins that are coming from you. And one day you'll stand before God and give an answer to those. My only answer when I stand before God is not anything good that I did, because I've done nothing good enough. My only answer in standing before God is to go, Jesus died the death I deserved, and I'm triumphant through him. That's all I have. That's the only hope I have. And it's the only hope you have too. If you're not fixing your eyes on Jesus, not only life will be tragedy, eternity will be tragedy, because we'll be apart from him, judged by God. But in Christ, our expectation should be that life is going to be hard and God is going to be good. I know many churches will tell you, have enough faith and you won't get sick, and have enough faith and you'll be rich, and have enough faith and everything will happen like you want it to. I look through Scripture and I go, that's a lie from the pit of hell. Because in the end of the day, what I see is those who are following Jesus the closest are the ones who suffered the most. And if that makes Christ known to my neighbors, if that makes Christ known to the nations, bring the suffering to me. If God is made more known in tragedy in my life than in triumph, then God bring tragedy to me. Because my triumph is not that God makes my life easy. My triumph is that one day he'll make eternal life possible for me. That's the ultimate triumph. We've got to reevaluate the way we view our world and ourselves. We're not taking in the next 100 years. The 20th century contained unbridled amount of change. I don't think any century in history had as much, maybe progress, we'll see whether it's progress, as what happened in the 20th century. But one thing is certain. Not only was there great progress, evil was on the move in that century in unmatched ways. I have no idea what the rest of the 21st century is going to look like, but I have no reason to think that evil won't be on the move. And I know that this fallen world is going to keep giving us opportunities to experience suffering and pain in this world. So let's stop being surprised when we face trouble, and when we face trials, when we face pain, when we face suffering. Let's stop questioning God's heart when the world doesn't unfold exactly as we think it should. Let's stop questioning God's love when life is not a walk in the park, when life feels like a round in the octagon. No matter what happens in life, a child of God will see their Father's handiwork in every joy and in every sorrow. So today, will you set your feet for tragedy? Will you set your hopes for triumph? Will you fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith? The only hope that we have. Will you view the news through the lens of it ends up Jesus wins and he rules and reigns forever? Will you view your life through the lens of, like we heard last week, Jesus wins and he rules and reigns forever? And when we fall short, when we offended God, when we want to love Jesus and we end up looking awful, we run to him saying, Jesus, you won. And I confess, you're the reason that I have hope. You win in my heart and you rule and reign forever. Evaluate your expectations. Evaluate your relationship with Jesus. Let's pray. God, I thank you for the good news of the gospel coming through in a chapter that the church often ignores. Lord, I pray you would help us in the midst of a time where we see headlines of increased war in the Middle East, of forces attacking Israel, and we see stuff unfolding in Washington, and we see conflict with Russia and the Ukraine. We see wars and rumors of wars. We hear earthquakes. We hear all these natural disasters. Lord, this is a fallen and broken world where pain exists. Lord, let us be a people who are trusting in Christ. Our feet are set on the solid rock of who you are. Our identity is rooted in who you say we are. We are prepared for tragedy because we know life in a fallen world is going to hurt. In this world, we are going to have trouble, but we can take heart because Jesus has already overcome the world. Lord, help us have both feet set for tragedy, hopes set for triumph. And Lord, this is not hope like we hope our team has a good season or we hope this new deal comes out at work. Or this is confident expectation of a yet unfulfilled certainty. Hope is not random and fleeting. This is a certainty that the God who said it will do it. Lord, help us to be a people who trust that. In a world that is lost and is dark and is hurting, Lord, let us not ignore that pain. Let us be providing a glimpse of the hope within the pain. God, use our lives, use our expectations, use the way we live and react to the world around us to make the good news of the gospel known. If there's anybody here this morning that is not following you, they've been trying to live life in their own strength, and they keep taking punch after punch after punch, and they wonder how a good God can allow these bad things. Lord, let them see that whatever happens in their life that brings them to a point of surrender before you, it's not just good, it is great. It's not just good, it is loving. It's not just good, it's essential. Call people to salvation this morning. Call those who have wandered to a deeper walk with you. Let all of us be more steadfast in our devotion and expectation of you being faithful. And let our lives look like your love. In Jesus' name, amen.